They called her name over the loudspeaker loud enough to make every soldier turn. In front of the entire unit, Staff Sergeant Morgan Riley was handed a sealed envelope and told to exit the lineup. No reason, no explanation, just the cold precision of institutional rejection. Someone laughed. Someone else muttered, "Guess the librarian couldn't handle real combat." She said nothing, just walked away, her short auburn hair ruffling in the desert breeze as she stood alone near the barracks, watching the other EOD specialists perform their drills in the distance. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. At 29, Morgan was older than most of the specialists in the Advanced Explosive Ordnance Disposal program, with intense hazel eyes that missed nothing and a quiet demeanor that had made her an easy target. The wind carried fragments of laughter from a group of younger soldiers, all from military families, all sailing through evaluations with suspiciously consistent scores. Major Victor Hargrove approached, his weathered features arranged in an expression of professional regret that didn't reach his steel-gray eyes. "We've reviewed your field response metrics," he stated, voice clinically detached. "They don't meet criteria for high-stress tactical deployment." His tone was reasonable, his words following protocol perfectly, yet the satisfaction lurking beneath his perfect composure was unmistakable to her. The sun was setting now, casting an orange glow across the training compound and barracks. Morgan touched the small pocket knife fastened to the inside of her uniform. Her grandfather's knife, the only thing she had left of him after his passing 5 years ago. She ran her thumb over the worn wooden handle, feeling the slight indentation where his initials had once been deeply carved before years of handling had smoothed them away. James William Riley hadn't been just any Army engineer. He'd been a legend in military circles, known for his steady hands and methodical approach to the most complex explosive devices. Military engineers would go miles out of their way to consult with him, trusting his instincts more than field manuals. "You've got the touch, Magpie," he'd told her the first time he'd taught her how to dismantle a basic circuit at the age of 14. "It's in your blood." The memory both comforted and stung. She'd promised him she would serve someday, really serve, not just in a support role. Now that promise lay shattered at her feet, another casualty of a system that valued brute force over precision skill. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the approach of Master Sergeant Diego Ramirez until his gravelly voice broke through her reverie. "Rough day, kid." The 45-year-old EOD veteran had grease smudged across his forearm and compassion in his eyes. His weathered hands bore the marks of decades working with explosive devices. Scarred fingers, chemical burns embedded in the creases of his skin, calluses permanently hardened from years of delicate work with deadly materials. Unlike most at the training center, Diego had never treated her with disdain. She'd often found refuge in the equipment shed, her technical aptitude earning her a modicum of respect from the veteran technician. "Just got my walk-in papers," she replied, keeping her voice steady with practiced control. "Apparently, my tactical response profile doesn't meet standards." The bitter words tasted like ash in her mouth, but she refused to let her disappointment show. Diego's weathered face hardened. "Hargrove's work, I'm guessing. The same way your diagnostic tools mysteriously recalibrated during yesterday's field test." The unexpected insight caught her off guard. For weeks, she had performed flawlessly in training and maintenance, tests only to face inexplicable equipment issues during critical evaluations. There had always been some documented reason calibration drift, software glitches, sensor anomalies, all perfectly timed to undermine her performance. "Doesn't matter now," she said, turning to walk toward the base exit. "I've got 48 hours to clear out." Diego stepped into her path, his expression suddenly intense. "Hold up, you're just going to walk away? Let Hargrove win." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Morgan's jaw tightened. I fought every day I was here, Master Sergeant. They've made their decision. Diego glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard, then leaned closer. What if I told you there might be a way to show them exactly what they're throwing away? There was something in Diego's tone that made her pause. A conspiratorial edge that kindled a dangerous spark of hope. I'm listening, she said cautiously. Diego nodded toward the equipment shed. Walk with me. As they moved across the compound, the older man spoke in low, urgent tones. 3 days from now, there's going to be a demonstration for some big brass from Washington, a showcase of the program's best specialists. Hargrove's the star attraction, of course, showing off with the new prototype detection equipment they just brought in for testing. Morgan's eyes widened. The XMD-11 was the Army's premier explosive detection system, a technological marvel that few EOD specialists ever got to handle. What's that got to do with me? She asked, though a wild idea was already forming in her mind. Diego's eyes glinted with mischief and determination. I've been watching you. Riley, you've got skills these muscle-bound knuckleheads couldn't touch with a decade of training. It's in your instincts, the way you handle every device you touch. He paused at the shed entrance, turning to face her fully. Your grandfather and I served together for 8 years before the incident that got him reassigned to training. I was there when they falsified the intelligence report, claimed it was operative error, when the real error was Hargrove's manipulated intelligence data. She felt a jolt as Diego's gaze flicked momentarily to the barely visible edge of her grandfather's knife. You've got 3 days, he continued. 3 days to prove what you can do. And I know how you can do it, but it's risky. Career-ending for me, possibly worse for you. That night, the practice range hummed with activity under her touch. Its equipment familiar yet thrillingly different from anything she'd officially trained on at the center. Diego stood watch at the shed door as she settled into the specialized gear, her heart racing with equal parts fear and exhilaration. The soft glow of the detection equipment illuminated her face, casting shadows that accentuated her determined expression. Her fingers moved across the calibration sequence with practiced precision, each component responding to her touch as if welcoming her home. You've got 2 hours, he told her. Make them count. As the detection screens illuminated around her, she closed her eyes for just a moment, allowing herself to be transported back to a different time to a small workshop behind her grandfather's house, where model explosives and circuit boards had been her first classroom. Her grandfather's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, "Feel the device, Magpie. Don't just disarm it, understand it." The memories flooded back with startling clarity. James Riley had been more than just her grandfather. He'd been her mentor, her champion, and her first glimpse into a world beyond their small suburban home. A former EOD specialist himself before an injury had grounded him permanently, he turned to training others to stay in the field. On her 14th birthday, instead of the makeup or clothing other girls might have received, James had led his granddaughter to the workshop behind their property and placed a dummy explosive device before her. She remembered the smell of solder mingling with the earthy scent of his old leather workshop apron. The wooden work table worn smooth from years of use, the tools laid out with military precision, fitting her small hands as if they had been made for her. Time you learned the family business, he'd said with a wink. The training program Diego had selected was no beginner's course. It was the Advanced Counter-IED module reserved for final stage specialists. If she could master this, she could handle anything in the field. For the next 2 hours, she lost herself in the virtual battlefield. The first few attempts were rough, the XMD-11 sensitivity catching her off guard after months of training on less sophisticated equipment. 3 times she triggered virtual detonations during high-pressure scenarios, the system flashing red with failure notifications. But with each simulation, each virtual mission, her hands grew more confident on the controls. Her instincts, honed through years of unauthorized practice in her grandfather's workshop, began to assert themselves. The fourth attempt showed marked improvement. By the sixth, she was outperforming the program benchmarks. What the training center instructors had dismissed as unorthodox technique was in reality the mark of a natural EOD specialist who understood explosives on an intuitive level. When the simulated XMD-11 experienced a catastrophic sensor failure during a complex, multi-trigger IED scenario, she instinctively executed a sequence of adjustments that not only stabilized the equipment, but maintained mission parameters. By the time Diego returned to warn that security would be making rounds soon, she had completed 3 combat scenarios with scores that would have placed her at the top of any class. "I told you," Diego said with quiet satisfaction as she reluctantly powered down the equipment. The security logs would show only routine maintenance checks, thanks to his careful preparation. "You've got the touch, just like your grandfather. James could feel a device's design better than anyone I ever knew." Before Hargrove made sure he'd never work an active EOD again, she glanced at the hidden pocket knife inside her uniform. "Why didn't you tell me you knew him so well?" Diego's expression grew somber. "Watching your old friend's reputation get destroyed does something to a man. I tried to fight it back then and got nowhere." The system closed ranks around Hargrove, the golden boy with the right connections. "But seeing you work now, it's like history giving us a second chance." Their conversation was cut short by the sound of footsteps approaching the shed. "We've got to move," he whispered urgently, guiding her toward a side exit. Security. As they slipped out into the night, she realized they'd left the detection equipment running. A security camera mounted in the corner of the shed blinked silently, its red light a silent witness to her unauthorized session. Diego noticed it too late. "Damn it," he muttered. "Someone's going to see that footage." She felt a chill of dread. "What happens now?" she asked, knowing that whatever slim chance she had of proving herself had likely just evaporated. But Diego's expression was calculating rather than defeated. Now we accelerate the plan. You've got 72 hours to prove what you can do, and someone just saw you do it. Question is who, and what will they do about it?" The morning after her training session, she awoke to an urgent knock on her dormitory door. Throwing on a t-shirt and sweatpants, she opened it to find Lieutenant Sofia Reyes standing in the hallway, her dark eyes unreadable. At 32, Reyes was one of the few female officers at the center and known for her tough but fair approach. She was also, Morgan noted with a sinking feeling, the head of security operations. "Riley," Reyes said crisply, "get dressed and meet me at Shed 6 in 15 minutes. Don't talk to anyone on your way there." Before she could respond, the lieutenant turned and strode away, leaving her standing barefoot and confused in the doorway. So this was it. They'd discovered the unauthorized equipment use, and now she was about to face the consequences. She dressed quickly, her mind racing through possible scenarios, none of them good. Best case, she'd simply be escorted off the base immediately rather than having the 48 hours she'd been granted to pack her things. Worst case, there would be legal repercussions, possibly affecting Diego as well. The thought of the grizzled veteran facing disciplinary action because of her made her stomach twist with guilt. As she made her way across the grounds toward Shed 6, a smaller facility used primarily for equipment storage, she kept her eyes forward, avoiding the curious glances of passing soldiers. Word of her dismissal had spread quickly, and she had no desire to fuel the gossip mill further. Lieutenant Reyes was waiting inside the shed, standing beside a tarp-covered piece of equipment that she immediately recognized as the detection system from the night before. Her heart sank. There was no denying her actions now. "Close the door," Reyes instructed, her tone giving away nothing. Morgan complied, then stood at attention, bracing herself for what was to come. To her surprise, instead of beginning a reprimand, Reyes walked to a control panel on the wall and pressed several buttons. Security cameras in the corners of the shed powered down with soft beeps. "We have exactly 7 minutes before the system automatically reactivates," the lieutenant said, turning back to face her. "That should be enough time for you to explain why you were using restricted equipment after hours, and why your performance metrics broke 3 center records." She blinked, entirely stunned. This wasn't the conversation she'd expected. "You saw the footage?" Reyes nodded, a hint of impatience crossing her features. "I monitor all security alerts personally. Imagine my surprise when I saw a supposedly subpar specialist, one who'd just been dismissed from the program, handling complex IED scenarios with more skill than most of our graduating class. So I'll ask again, explain." Morgan hesitated, weighing her options. Lying would be pointless. The evidence was literally right beside them. But the truth implicated Diego, whose career was on the line. As if reading her thoughts, Reyes added, "And before you try to protect Ramirez, don't bother. I know he helped you access the system. What I want to know is why." Taking a deep breath, she made her decision. "Because Major Hargrove's assessment of my abilities was wrong," she said, meeting Reyes's gaze directly. "I've been working with explosives since I was 14. My grandfather was James Riley, an EOD specialist before he was reassigned. He taught me everything he knew." Her voice grew stronger as she continued, fueled by months of suppressed frustration. "But from day one, something always went wrong during my evaluations. Equipment malfunctions, calibration issues, all conveniently timed and never thoroughly investigated. I used the equipment because I wanted proof, for myself if no one else, that I deserved to be here. Master Sergeant Ramirez just gave me the chance to show what I can really do without interference." Reyes's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes, recognition perhaps, or understanding. The lieutenant had faced her own battles in the male-dominated world of military explosive ordnance disposal. Rumors of her clashes with the old guard were well known among the specialists. "That's a serious accusation, Riley," she said after a moment. "Manipulating evaluation systems is grounds for court-martial." Morgan squared her shoulders. "I know what I'm saying, and I know the risks." Reyes studied her for a long moment, then glanced at her watch. 3 minutes left. "So what exactly was your plan?" "Break into the equipment, prove you can handle explosives, then what?" "The dismissal order is already filed." "I don't know," she admitted, the brief surge of defiance fading. "It was stupid and impulsive. I just couldn't walk away without trying." To her surprise, Reyes's stone expression softened fractionally. "No, it wasn't stupid. Reckless, maybe, but not stupid." The lieutenant moved to the equipment and pulled back the tarp completely, revealing the sophisticated system beneath. "You know what this is scheduled for, right? The demonstration for the Pentagon officials this Friday. Hargrove's big moment in the spotlight." Morgan nodded. Diego had mentioned the showcase. "What if," Rhea said slowly, "instead of leaving the base quietly, you showed the brass exactly what kind of talent Hargrove is pushing out the door?" As the security cameras hummed back to life, Reyes stepped back, her professional demeanor firmly back in place. "You're restricted to base until your discharge is finalized. Riley," she said loudly for the benefit of any monitoring systems. "I'll expect you to comply with all protocols during your remaining time here." With that, the lieutenant strode to the door, pausing only briefly to add, "Green uses access code 4729 for his sessions. He's notoriously forgetful about logging out properly." And then she was gone, leaving Morgan standing alone in the shed, her mind reeling with possibilities that had seemed impossible just minutes before. That night, as she slipped into the equipment room using Green's credentials, she was startled by movement in the shadows. Corporal Alex Green himself stepped forward, his handsome face unreadable. Figured I'd find you here, he said quietly. She tensed, ready to defend herself, but Green made no move to sound an alarm. Hargrove assigned me to watch you, he admitted, surprising her with his candor. Said you might try something before leaving. Told me to record anything suspicious. He held up a small device, a voice recorder, then deliberately switched it off. She regarded him warily. Why are you telling me this? Green hesitated, then gestured to the detection equipment. Last week, I watched you diagnose and fix an oscillation issue in the M47 detector that 3 instructors couldn't solve. Then, your evaluation suddenly showed you failing to comprehend basic detection principles. He shook his head, genuine confusion in his eyes. It doesn't add up. Moving closer, he observed the screen displaying her last simulation scores. I've been trying to nail that sequential wire disarming technique for weeks, he said, nodding toward the completed scenario statistics. Hargrove says it's essential for the demonstration on Friday, but I can't seem to get the timing right. For the next hour, they worked together, her guiding Green through the technique. As they trained, Green revealed more. Hargrove's been altering your evaluation scores. I've seen him do it. And then the bombshell. The IEDs for Friday's demonstration, one of them is designated JR to 117 with a trigger mechanism almost identical to the Kandahar device. She froze, recognizing her grandfather's incident designation. Green explained that Hargrove had specifically requested that configuration, mentioning poetic justice and closing the circle. As they finished the session, Green's expression had changed from skepticism to quiet respect. I don't know what they see when they look at you, he said, shutting down the equipment. But I see someone who handles explosives like she belongs. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of clandestine meetings and late-night training sessions. Morgan, Reyes, Diego, and Green formed an unlikely alliance, each bringing unique skills and knowledge to their hastily constructed plan. During the day, Morgan maintained the pretense of preparing to leave the base, packing her belongings and completing discharge paperwork with a resignation that fooled all but the most observant eyes. But at night, she transformed into the EOD specialist she was born to be, spending hours with the detection equipment using Green's access code, mastering the XMD-11's complex systems, and pushing its virtual capabilities to their limits. You're a natural, Diego observed during one such session. His gruff voice softened with something like paternal pride. Just like your old man. Lieutenant Reyes proved to be a formidable strategist, using her position as head of security to monitor Hargrove's movements and communications without raising suspicion. It was Reyes who discovered that the Major had scheduled a private inspection of the demonstration field the night before the event. He's going to do a final check of all systems, she reported during their meeting in a rarely used storage facility. Standard procedure, but it gives him ample opportunity to make any adjustments he might want to ensure the equipment performs to his specifications. The implication hung heavy in the air. If Hargrove had been willing to manipulate evaluation systems to keep Morgan out of the program, what might he do to guarantee his own success during the highest profile demonstration of his career? You think he'd tamper with the devices? Green asked, his voice hushed despite the privacy of their location. He had been the most reluctant member of their conspiracy at first, years of conditioned loyalty to Hargrove warring with his newfound conscience. But with each revelation of the Major's ethical compromises, Green's resolve had strengthened. Not directly, Diego replied, his eyes hard with accumulated knowledge of military politics. Hargrove's too smart for that. But he might make subtle optimizations, tweaks to the detection algorithms, adjustments to the sensor arrays, nothing that would register as sabotage, but enough to give him an edge during the demonstration. Morgan frowned, considering the implications. Could those same optimizations be used against him? She asked, an idea beginning to form. Diego's slow smile was answer enough. The plan they ultimately devised was audacious, requiring split-second timing and flawless execution. Reyes would ensure Morgan's continued access to the base despite her official dismissal, while Green would serve as their eyes and ears within Hargrove's inner circle. Diego's role was perhaps the most crucial and the most dangerous. As chief equipment specialist, he would be present during Hargrove's inspection of the field. "I can't stop him from making his adjustments," Diego explained, "but I can document them. And more importantly, I can ensure they're not as effective as he thinks they'll be." The risk was enormous. If caught, Diego faced not just dismissal but potential criminal charges. Yet the old specialist seemed almost cheerful about the prospect. "Some things are worth the risk," he said when Morgan expressed concern. "Your grandfather would have done the same for me." Getting her from the barracks to the demonstration field would require navigating multiple security checkpoints. "This will get you past level 2, Reyes said, handing her a forged security badge. "After that, you're on your own." Green provided a security schedule showing a gap in surveillance between 13:45 and 14:05, a 20-minute window of opportunity. "There's just one problem," he warned. "You'll have to cross the main training corridor at peak changeover. If anyone recognizes you..." The implications were clear. She would be on her own, deep in restricted territory with no plausible explanation for her presence. The night before the demonstration, their plan was set in motion. Green reported that Hargrove was more agitated than usual, snapping at specialists and obsessively reviewing the demonstration patterns for the 100th time. "He's nervous," Green observed with some surprise. "I've never seen him like this before." Morgan understood the pressure all too well. The Pentagon officials attending the demonstration weren't just evaluating the equipment, they were assessing the future leadership of the Army's elite EOD training programs. For Hargrove, the stakes couldn't be higher, which made him both predictable and dangerous. As darkness fell over the base, she made her way to a predetermined observation point near the demonstration field, where she could watch Hargrove's inspection without being seen. What she witnessed over the next 2 hours confirmed their suspicions. Hargrove moved methodically around the field, occasionally conferring with Diego or consulting a tablet he carried. At several points, he directed the specialist to make subtle adjustments to various components, nothing dramatic, but enough to customize the equipment's performance to his specific preferences. Midway through the inspection, Diego clutched his side suddenly, face contorting in apparent pain. "Old injury," he gasped to Hargrove. "Need a minute." The distraction gave Diego crucial moments alone with the detection system, enough time to document the changes and implement subtle countermeasures. When Hargrove finally departed, looking satisfied with his preparations, Morgan remained hidden until Diego emerged from the field alone. The specialist didn't approach her hiding spot directly. Instead, he made a show of locking up the facility and heading toward his quarters. Only when he passed near her position did he drop a small object that glinted in the moonlight, a data drive containing documentation of Hargrove's optimizations. What she couldn't know was that at that very moment, Hargrove was reviewing security footage in his office, a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand and a troubled expression on his face. Despite their precautions, something had triggered his suspicion, perhaps a pattern in Green's movements or an inconsistency in the base's security logs. The major rewound the footage, studying it with narrowed eyes, searching for confirmation of the unease that had been growing in him for days. When he finally found what he was looking for, a brief glimpse of Morgan entering a restricted area, during hours when she should have been confined to her quarters, his handsome face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "Not this time, Riley," he murmured, reaching for his phone. "Not on my watch." The day of the demonstration dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for field operations. Morgan awoke before sunrise, mentally reviewing their plan one final time. The window of opportunity would be narrow, Barely 3 minutes to move from the maintenance access to the field without being detected. Their conspiracy hinged on precise timing and the assumption that Hargrove, confident in his position, wouldn't anticipate their move until it was too late. Thanks to Diego's documentation, they knew exactly what optimizations the Major had made to the XMED-11 shuttle, adjustments to the sensor algorithms, and detection sequences for an edge during complex scenarios. What Hargrove didn't know was that Diego had implemented countermeasures, restoring the equipment's factory settings in ways undetectable during pre-demonstration checks. At noon, she met with her co-conspirators in their unofficial headquarters. Diego looked exhausted but determined, dark circles ringing his eyes from a night spent, meticulously recalibrating sensors to mask his modifications to the equipment. "The field is ready," he reported. "Hargrove completed his pre-demonstration check an hour ago. Everything's exactly as it should be, which means nothing is as he expects it to be." Lieutenant Reyes frowned, checking her watch. "There's a problem. Security rotation changed. I'm assigned to the VIP section. I won't be able to clear your path as planned." She handed Morgan a security badge with her photo, but a different name. "This will get you past level 2. After that, you're on your own." Diego pulled her aside, pressing something small and metallic into her palm. "Your grandfather would want you to have this today," he said gruffly. She opened her hand to find a set of EOD specialist's pins, not the worn pocketknife she'd carried for years, but a gleaming official set inscribed with James William Riley's name and service number. "He earned these," Diego explained, emotion thick in his voice. "Kept them even after everything. Found them in his personal effects after he passed." She closed her fingers around the pins, too moved to speak. This was more than a keepsake. It was a tangible connection to her grandfather's legitimate service, a reminder of what had been taken from him and what she was fighting to reclaim. At 1400 hours, Hargrove and his team took to the field. She watched as the Major and his select specialists arranged themselves around the demonstration area, preparing to showcase their skills with the advanced detection equipment. Even from a distance, she could identify the specialized training devices by their distinctive markings, including one she recognized as bearing her grandfather's designation, JR to 117, for 15 minutes. She observed as Hargrove led his team through impressive protocols, showcasing the XMD-11's capabilities. It was, she had to admit, a masterful display. Whatever else Hargrove might be, he was undeniably skilled. But skill without integrity was like equipment without a soul, technically proficient, but lacking the human element that transformed mere work into something transcendent. At 1440 hours, her cum crackled with Green's voice. "He's setting up for the sequential disarm now. Stand by." Her heart pounded as she watched Hargrove approach the device bearing her grandfather's designation, the moment everything hinged on. The window that would either open or close forever in the next 60 seconds. "Now," Green's voice came again. Maintenance alert triggered. "You have approximately 2 minutes." She moved swiftly through the maintenance corridor, only to freeze as a security officer rounded the corner. His hand instinctively moved toward his sidearm, eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Ma'am, this area is restricted during demonstrations," he called. Without missing a beat, she knelt by an exposed junction box. "Signal calibration check," she replied, gesturing to the wires. "Detection grid getting interference from E sector." She pulled a multimeter from her pocket, a detail Diego had insisted on for authenticity. The technical jargon and her confident tone worked. The officer nodded and continued his patrol. Heart hammering, she resumed her path to the demonstration field where the IED devices awaited. As she approached the edge of the field, she felt a moment of pure clarity, a certainty that transcended fear or doubt. This was what she had been born to do. Her hands moved with confident precision as she slipped onto the field while Hargrove was facing the other direction, demonstrating an advanced detection technique to the assembled officials. What happened next unfolded with the inevitability of destiny. Hargrove, finishing his explanation, turned to gesture toward the JR-117 device only to freeze, as he spotted Morgan already kneeling beside it, the XMD-11 detection system in her hands. For a moment, time seemed suspended. Hargrove's face registered shock, then confusion, and finally cold fury as he recognized her. But before he could speak, General Catherine Chang, the head of the Pentagon delegation, raised her voice. "Major, who is this specialist?" This wasn't on the demonstration agenda. Hargrove's professional mask slipped back into place with visible effort. "She's not part of the demonstration, General. In fact, she was dismissed from the program 2 days ago for failing to meet standards." Chang's eyebrows rose. "Yet she appears to be handling your equipment with considerable confidence." As all eyes turned to Morgan, she kept her focus entirely on the device before her. The XMD-11 in her hands was responding differently than Hargrove had expected. The subtle changes Diego had made were forcing him to compensate continuously, taxing his skills to maintain the appearance of effortless control. Now, as Morgan activated the detection sequence, the device's reading showed anomalies that Hargrove hadn't anticipated, anomalies that indicated a far more complex triggering mechanism than the one he had prepared for. "What are you doing, Riley?" he hissed, moving closer while trying to maintain his composure before the assembled officials. Instead of answering, she simply held up her hand in a gesture that silenced him, a gesture so confident that even Hargrove found himself momentarily complying. "General Chang," she said without looking up, "this device has been modified from its original demonstration parameters. There are secondary and tertiary trigger mechanisms not included in the briefing materials." Chang turned to Hargrove with a sharp look. "Is this true, Major?" "Of course not," Hargrove replied smoothly. "Riley is attempting to disrupt the demonstration. Security will remove her immediately." But as security personnel began to move forward, Morgan's hands moved with lightning speed across the device. The XMD-11 in her grasp chirped with multiple alerts, confirmations of exactly what she had claimed. 3 additional pressure triggers, a light sensor, and a motion detector, she announced, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent field. All linked to a secondary detonator that would register as a failure in the demonstration parameters, even though the primary trigger had been successfully neutralized. General Chang's expression hardened. "Major Hargrove, explain this discrepancy." The confusion that followed was exactly what they had counted on. As controllers scrambled to verify Morgan's claims and Hargrove's team responded to the unexpected development, she seized her moment. With fluid grace, she disarmed the first trigger mechanism, then the second, then the third, her movements so precise and confident that the assembled officials found themselves holding their breath. Through it all, the XMD-11 continued to flag anomalies that shouldn't have been present in a standard demonstration device. Hargrove's face had lost its color. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "The devices were prepared to demonstration specifications. Riley is manipulating the equipment. Am I?" Morgan countered, finally looking up to meet his gaze. "Or did you modify this particular device designated GR-117 to be uniquely challenging?" She tapped her grandfather's pins, now proudly displayed on her uniform. "The same way you manipulated the Kandahar incident report 8 years ago?" The silence that descended was absolute. Even the security personnel had frozen in place, aware they were witnessing something extraordinary. In the breathless quiet, Morgan returned her attention to the device, continuing her methodical disarming process with a calm that belied the tension surrounding her. When the final trigger had been neutralized, a particularly devious mechanism hidden within what appeared to be a standard power source, she stood slowly, the deactivated device in her hands. "General Chang," she said, "with your permission, I'd like to demonstrate the standard disarming protocol on the remaining devices." I believe you'll find they've also been modified beyond their stated parameters." The general's gaze shifted between Morgan and Hargrove, assessingly. Then, with a slight nod, she made her decision. "Proceed, Specialist. I'm interested to see what else might have been overlooked in the briefing materials." What followed was a masterclass in explosive ordnance disposal. One by one, Morgan approached each of the remaining devices, identifying hidden triggers and complex mechanisms that shouldn't have been present in standard demonstration equipment. With each discovery, Hargrove's position grew more untenable, his explanations more strained. By the time she neutralized the 12th and final device using only her grandfather's pocket knife to bypass an electronic countermeasure when the XMD-11 experienced a sudden power failure, General Chang's assessment was clear. "I believe we need to have a conversation in private, Major Hargrove," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Lieutenant Reyes, please escort the rest of the team back to the briefing room. Specialist Riley, you will remain here." As the field cleared, Morgan found herself standing alone with the general, a woman whose reputation for uncompromising standards was legendary throughout the armed forces. "That was quite a display, Specialist," Chang said after a moment. "Would you care to explain how someone supposedly dismissed for failing to meet standards just disarmed 12 modified IEDs with more skill than I've seen in 20 years of oversight?" Morgan met the general's gaze steadily. "The simplest explanation, ma'am, is that my dismissal wasn't based on my abilities." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of testimony and evidence in the base's briefing room. General Chang and senior officers reviewed Diego's footage showing Hargrove making unauthorized adjustments to the demonstration, equipment adjustments that would have given him an advantage while potentially compromising safety protocols. When confronted, Hargrove's arrogance finally cracked. "The modifications were minor," he insisted. "Standard practice for experienced specialists." The excuse fell flat as Green contradicted him, detailing how Hargrove had systematically falsified Morgan's evaluations. "He told me it was necessary to maintain standards," Green admitted, unable to meet Morgan's eyes. "Said that letting someone like Riley succeed would undermine the program's prestige." Lieutenant Reyes corroborated this with her own investigation. "There appears to be a pattern, sir," Reyes reported, placing the data tablet before the general. "Over the past 5 years, 23 candidates without family connections have seen their scores manipulated. Morgan Riley isn't an isolated case, she's just the first one who fought back effectively." Diego's final revelation truly shattered Hargrove's remaining dignity. The incident that ended James Riley's EO'd career, the accident attributed to Specialist Error Major Hargrove, was the security officer who signed off on the intelligence report before that mission. The official record shows an intelligence failure that James supposedly should have anticipated. Diego produced a faded incident report. What it doesn't show is that Hargrove had modified the intelligence briefing. Modifications virtually identical to what he did to the demonstration today. "Is this true, Major?" General Chang demanded quietly. Hargrove's silence was answer enough. The general turned to Morgan. "Specialist Riley, while your methods today were unorthodox, you have exposed a serious breach of ethics within our training program. Your grandfather was an exceptional EOD specialist whose career was cut short by circumstances that now appear to warrant further investigation." Hargrove was immediately relieved of command, his demonstration officially recorded as compromised by procedural irregularities. While Morgan's field intervention was noted as an unauthorized but technically proficient operation, the general directed a full review of all specialist evaluations from the past 5 years. With Green appointed to the Oversight Committee, a redemption that would ensure fairness for future candidates. Most significantly, Chang personally rescinded Morgan's dismissal, reinstating her with a probationary period under Reyes's supervision. From her breast pocket, the general withdrew a small velvet box. James William Riley was posthumously exonerated last year. The evidence was compelling enough to warrant a formal apology and restoration of his service record. She opened the box, revealing a distinguished service medal. "This belongs to your family. I'd planned to mail it, but it seems fitting to present it in person." Morgan accepted it with trembling hands, tears blurring her vision. "He never talked much about his military service," she said softly. "I think it hurt too much knowing people believed he'd failed." General Chang nodded. These hands weren't too delicate. They were stifled by silence. "You made them work again." 3 months later, Morgan found herself in a different desert, the Afghan sun beating down mercilessly as she studied the scene before her. The village had been evacuated after locals reported finding suspicious devices near the school, devices that didn't match any known insurgent patterns. Her team had already located and neutralized 4 IEDs, but intelligence suggested there were at least 3 more. "What's your assessment, Riley?" Captain Reyes, recently promoted and now Morgan's commanding officer, stood a few paces back, giving her space to work. Morgan knelt in the dust, the advanced XMD-11 detection system forgotten at her side, as she studied the barely disturbed soil before her. Something about the pattern of small rocks, too perfectly arranged to be natural, had caught her attention. "This is different," she said, eyes narrowed against the glare. "Not standard insurgent work. These devices aren't meant to cause maximum casualties. They're designed to evade standard detection protocols." Reyes moved closer, careful to follow in Morgan's footsteps exactly. "How can you tell?" "The spacing," Morgan replied, pointing to the subtle pattern. "It's too deliberate. And look at how the soil has been replaced. Someone took their time, making sure not to disturb the surrounding area more than necessary. This isn't the work of someone planting devices quickly under cover of darkness." Behind them, Specialist Green monitored the perimeter, keeping watch as Morgan worked. The former corporal had requested a transfer to their unit after the investigation at the training center, determined to learn EOD work properly without shortcuts or politics. "I'm getting unusual readings," he reported, studying his handheld detector. "Multiple potential triggers, but they're dispersed rather than concentrated." Morgan nodded, her grandfather's voice seeming to whisper in her ear. "The most dangerous devices aren't the ones that announce themselves. They're the ones that hide in plain sight." "This isn't an insurgent's work," she said with sudden certainty. "This is someone with formal training. Military or ex-military." Reyes's expression tightened. "You're thinking a contractor gone rogue?" "Or someone testing our response protocols," Morgan replied, carefully brushing away a thin layer of dust to reveal the edge of what appeared to be a standard pressure plate, but subtly modified with a secondary trigger mechanism that would activate if the primary one was disarmed incorrectly. For the next hour, she worked methodically, documenting each step of the disarming process while Green and Reyes maintained the security perimeter. The device was more sophisticated than anything she'd encountered before, a hybrid that combined military precision with improvised components, creating something uniquely dangerous. When the third trigger mechanism had been neutralized, Morgan finally allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. "Clear," she announced, sitting back on her heels. "But we need to re-examine the ones we've already disarmed. I think we may have missed secondary triggers." "Based on what?" Reyes asked, though she was already signaling to the rest of the team to reassess the previously cleared devices. "This isn't random," Morgan explained, carefully placing the neutralized components into an evidence container. "These devices are designed to teach us a lesson, to show us what we're missing in our standard protocols." She pointed to a distinctive wire configuration. "This is a signature. Whoever built these wants us to know they're not just planting bombs. They're making a point." The reassessment proved her right. 2 of the previously cleared devices contained dormant secondary triggers that would have activated approximately 6 hours after the initial. disarming long after the EOD team would have departed and civilians returned. "This is deliberate," Reyes said grimly as they documented the findings. "Someone's targeting our procedures, not just our personnel." As darkness fell, they continued working, methodically clearing a half-mile radius around the school. Morgan's instincts led them to 3 more devices hidden where standard sweep patterns might have missed them under a seemingly solid stone step. Inside a discarded tire that appeared too damaged to conceal anything. Behind a section of wall that looked recently repaired. By midnight, they had neutralized a total of 12 devices, each one more sophisticated than standard insurgent IEDs, each one designed to exploit weaknesses in standard EOD protocols. "Whoever did this knows our playbook," Green observed as they packed up their equipment. "They're thinking 3 steps ahead." Morgan nodded, her mind already working on the implications. "Which means we need to change how we think. If they know our protocols, we need to develop new ones." Back at the forward operating base, Morgan found herself unable to sleep despite the exhaustion weighing on her limbs. Instead, she spread her notes across the small desk in her quarters, searching for patterns, connections, anything that might reveal the identity or intentions of the bomber. A soft knock at her door broke her concentration. She opened it to find Captain Reyes holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," she said, offering one to Morgan. "You've been at it for hours." Morgan accepted the cup gratefully. "There's something here I'm missing," she admitted. "Something familiar about the design philosophy, if not the specific components." Reyes leaned against the doorframe. "You think it's someone from our side?" "I think it's someone who was trained by our side," Morgan replied carefully. "The precision, the anticipation of our procedures. This isn't something you pick up from manuals or online forums. This is someone who sat through the same briefings we did." The captain nodded slowly. "I've been thinking the same thing. That's why I requested access to the database of former contractors and specialists who served in this region." She held up a tablet. "Thought you might want to take a look." For the next 3 hours they combed through personnel files, looking for anyone with both the technical skills and the potential motivation to create such sophisticated devices. Near dawn, Morgan paused on a particular file, her tired eyes suddenly sharp with recognition. "Adrian Mercer," she read aloud. "Former EOD specialist, dishonorably discharged 4 years ago after allegedly falsifying equipment maintenance reports." Reyes moved to look over her shoulder. "What caught your eye?" "His training record," Morgan said, pointing to a specific entry. "He was at the Advanced Counter-IED course at Fort Irwin, the same class my grandfather taught before he was reassigned. And his evaluating officer was Hargrove," Reyes finished, her expression hardening. "Another career Hargrove might have sabotaged." Morgan studied Mercer's file more closely. After his discharge, he had dropped off the official radar, but intelligence suggested he had remained in the region, possibly working as a private security contractor. His last known location was less than 50 miles from their current position. "It's a theory," she said cautiously, "but it would explain the technical sophistication combined with the apparent vendetta against standard EOD protocols." Reyes straightened, decision made. "I'll take this to command. If Mercer's our bomber, we need to find him before he places more devices." The next day, their theory gained traction when analysis of the recovered devices revealed components that matched Mercer's known techniques. Command authorized a reconnaissance mission to his last known location, a compound on the outskirts of a small village near the Pakistani border. As the team prepared for departure, Morgan found herself facing an unexpected challenge. "I want you to lead the technical assessment," Reyes informed her. "If Mercer is there, you'll be our best chance of anticipating his countermeasures." The responsibility was enormous and exactly what she had trained for all her life. "Understood, Captain," she replied, neither refusing the burden nor taking it lightly. The journey to Mercer's suspected location took them through increasingly hostile territory. Twice they were forced to divert to avoid potential ambush sites, adding hours to their mission time. By the time they approached the compound, the sun was already low on the horizon, not the optimal conditions for the delicate work that potentially lay ahead. Thermals show 3 individuals inside, their reconnaissance specialist reported. 1 in the main building, 2 in what appears to be a workshop attached to the southern wall. Morgan studied the compound layout displayed on their tactical screens. Something about the approach looked too easy, a clear path to the main entrance. Minimal cover for defenders, no obvious lookout points. "It's a trap," she said with quiet certainty. "The entire approach is probably mined or rigged with pressure sensors." Reyes nodded, having come to the same conclusion. "Recommendations?" Morgan pointed to a seemingly unremarkable section of the perimeter wall. "There. That section has been repaired recently. You can see the difference in the material color. But it's been made to look weathered." She traced a path on the display. "If Mercer is as methodical as I think he is, he'll have focused his defenses on the obvious approaches, not on a section that appears structurally compromised." "That's a big assumption," Green observed, though without challenge in his voice. "It's how my grandfather would have thought," Morgan replied simply. "And Mercer trained under him." The decision made, they moved into position as darkness fell, using the terrain to mask their approach. Morgan led the way, every sense attuned to the slightest anomaly in the ground, the air, the sounds around them. When they reached the repaired section of wall, she paused, studying it intensely before carefully probing the surface. "Hollow," she whispered. "Recent work disguised to look old." With painstaking precision, she examined the section for triggers or alarms, finding none. "Either I'm right about his blind spot, or this is exactly what he wants us to do," she muttered, more to herself than to her team. "Only one way to find out," Reyes responded. "Proceed with caution." Morgan created a small opening in the wall, just large enough for them to pass through one at a time. Beyond lay a narrow space between the compound's outer wall and the workshop, building a maintenance gap not visible from aerial reconnaissance. They moved silently through the darkness, Morgan leading with her detection equipment, scanning continuously for threats. At the workshop's rear entrance, she paused again, detecting the faint signature of electronics embedded in the doorframe. "Alarm system," she whispered. "Sophisticated, not just a physical trigger." For 10 tense minutes, she worked to bypass the system, her hands steady despite the pressure. When the final connection was rerouted, she nodded to Reyes. "We're clear to enter, but we have approximately 3 minutes before the system cycles and detects the bypass." Inside, the workshop revealed the extent of Mercer's operation. Workbenches lined the walls, covered with components in various stages of assembly. Diagrams and schematics were pinned to a large corkboard, detailed plans for devices far more sophisticated than those they had discovered in the village. "He's not just targeting our protocols," Green said quietly, examining a partially assembled device. "He's designing the next generation of IEDs, ones specifically engineered to defeat our current detection methods." Morgan moved deeper into the workshop, drawn to a desk in the far corner where a laptop sat open. The screen displayed a map of the province, with multiple locations marked in red targets for future placements. "We need to," she began, then froze as she noticed a subtle change in the air pressure. The faint hum of electronics that had been present since they entered had shifted frequency almost imperceptibly. "Down!" she shouted, diving toward Reyes and Green as the first explosion rocked the compound. The secondary building across the courtyard erupted in flames, a diversion designed to draw in first responders. "The system cycled early," she explained as they took cover behind a reinforced workbench. "He must have a remote override." Reyes activated her unit. "All units be advised, we have active explosions at the target location. Maintain perimeter security and stand by for A second explosion cut her off, this one closer at the main entrance to the workshop. Through the smoke and debris, a figure appeared, silhouetted against the flames. Tall, lean, with the measured movements of someone accustomed to operating in hazardous environments. "Adrian Mercer," Morgan said, rising slowly from behind the workbench, her weapon leveled at the figure. The man paused, head tilting slightly as he studied her. "You're not who I was expecting," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "But you're in my workshop all the same. Impressive." "We found your devices in the village," Morgan replied, keeping her tone level despite the adrenaline coursing through her. 12 of them. All disarmed. Something flickered across Mercer's face, surprise, perhaps, or grudging respect. "All 12? That's unexpected. Standard EOD protocols would have missed at least 4 of them." "I don't use standard protocols," Morgan told him, taking a careful step forward. "Neither did my grandfather, James Riley. You trained under him, didn't you?" Mercer stared at her, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Riley," he said slowly. "You're his granddaughter." It wasn't a question. "Morgan Riley," she confirmed, never lowering her weapon. "EOD specialist. And I want to know why you're planting devices designed to kill the people, trying to keep civilians safe." A bitter smile twisted Mercer's features. "Is that what they told you I was doing? Creating devices to kill EOD specialists?" He gestured around the workshop. "If I wanted to kill your team, you wouldn't have made it past the perimeter. Then what exactly are you doing?" Reyes demanded, moving to flank Morgan. Mercer's eyes never left Morgan. "Testing. Exposing weaknesses in protocols that haven't evolved in 15 years. Protocols that get good specialists killed because they're taught to follow procedures instead of thinking." Another explosion rocked the compound, this one farther away part of a predetermined sequence, Morgan realized. Designed to draw attention, resources, create confusion. "The devices in the village," she pressed. "They could have killed children if we'd missed them." "They were never armed," Mercer replied, an edge entering his voice. "Check your evidence." "The detonators had no explosive compound, just enough electrical charge to register on your equipment. I don't target civilians." Green, who had been monitoring their tactical display, spoke up. "He's telling the truth, Riley. Command just confirmed all the devices were technically inert. Sophisticated training mock-ups." Morgan processed this information, reassessing everything they'd found. "But the secondary triggers would have sent a signal," Mercer finished for her. "Recording which ones were missed, how long it took to find them, which approaches were used. Data. That's all I wanted. Data to prove that the standard protocols are outdated and dangerous." "So you went rogue?" Reyes asked incredulously. "Planted fake IEDs across an active combat zone, triggered evacuations, put communities in fear all to prove a point?" Mercer's expression hardened. "When I tried to do it through official channels, I was shut down." "Sound familiar, Riley? Let me guess, Hargrove was involved in your career too." The parallel wasn't lost on Morgan. "Hargrove has been removed from command," she told him. "His methods are being investigated. There are channels now, legitimate ones, to address these concerns." Something shifted in Mercer's stance, a subtle relaxing of tension. "Hargrove's gone when?" 3 months ago, Morgan replied. "After he tried to sabotage my final evaluation. The same way he apparently did to you. The same way he did to my grandfather." For a moment, silence filled the workshop, broken only by the distant crackle of flames. Then Mercer did something unexpected. He slowly lowered the detonator in his hand. "Your grandfather was a good man," he said quietly. "The best instructor I ever had. When they forced him out, when Hargrove's report destroyed his reputation, I tried to defend him. That's when my own troubles began." Morgan kept her weapon steady, but her voice softened slightly. "So you decided to become the thing they accused him of being? Reckless, dangerous?" Mercer laughed a hollow sound with no humor in it. "I decided to prove them wrong the only way that seemed left to me, by demonstrating exactly how inadequate their precious protocols really are." He gestured toward his workbench. "Every device I've designed has exposed a different flaw in standard EOD training. Every one represents lives that could have been saved if specialists were taught to think beyond their manuals." "And now you've proven your point," Reyes interjected. 12 devices discovered and disarmed, even the ones designed to be missed by standard protocols. "What happens next, Mercer? How does this end?" The former specialist looked around his workshop at years of work and dedication, now exposed and compromised. "I don't know," he admitted. "This was always a means to an end, not the end itself." Morgan made a decision, then one born of understanding rather than procedure. She lowered her weapon slightly. "There's another way," she said. "A legitimate way to change the protocols, to honor what my grandfather taught both of us." Mercer's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What are you proposing?" "Come involuntarily," she said. "Bring your data, your designs, your evidence. Work with us to reform the training program from within." She took a careful step forward. "The system is changing, Mercer. People are listening now who weren't listening before." "They'll lock me up," he countered. "Everything I've done, unauthorized devices, the compound, the workshop, it crosses too many lines." "Yes," Morgan acknowledged honestly. "There will be consequences. But your information, your expertise, it has value. Enough value to negotiate terms." Reyes gave her a sharp look, but didn't contradict her. Morgan pressed on, sensing a critical moment balancing on a knife's edge. "My grandfather believed in teaching people to think beyond the manual," she said. "To understand not just how to disarm a device, but how the person who made it thinks. That's what you've been doing all along, isn't it? Trying to make us think differently." Mercer studied her face, searching for deception and finding none. "And if I refuse?" The compound shook as another explosion detonated closer this time, the perimeter security measures systematically eliminating potential escape routes. "Then this ends the way you planned it," Morgan replied simply. "With more destruction and no real change." For a long moment, the only sound was the distant chatter of radio communications as the security perimeter tightened around the compound. Then, with deliberate care, Mercer placed the detonator on the workbench and stepped away from it. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said quietly. "You found all 12. The tension in the room dissipated slightly, though Morgan maintained her vigilance. "How did you know to use his techniques on the JR-117 device?" she asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. A ghost of a smile touched Mercer's lips. "I didn't just train under him, I studied everything he ever wrote, every report, every field note. James Riley wasn't just a good EOD specialist. He was a visionary who understood that our enemies evolve. So should we." As they prepared to escort Mercer from the compound, Morgan found herself facing a final challenge, one that tested her newfound authority and the principles she'd fought to defend. "The data," Mercer said, gesturing toward his laptop. "It won't survive transport in standard military channels. Too many people still invested in the old ways. Too many careers built on protocols that need to change." It was a test of her integrity, her commitment to the truth over procedure. Sharing classified EOD information outside official channels was a serious breach. Yet protecting that information from those who might suppress it served a higher purpose. Morgan glanced at Reyes, whose expression remained carefully neutral, neither endorsing nor forbidding the choice Morgan was about to make. "We'll handle the data with the proper protocols," Morgan said aloud, for the benefit of any listening devices. Then, with a slight nod to Mercer, she slipped a data drive from her pocket and placed it on the desk beside the laptop. As they led Mercer out through the breach in the wall, the same unconventional entry point that had allowed them to bypass his defenses, he spoke softly. For her ears alone. You know they'll fight the changes every step of the way. The old guard doesn't surrender easily. Morgan nodded. Neither do I. 6 months later, Morgan stood before a very different audience, a classroom of 30 EOD trainees at the newly restructured Advanced Countermeasures Program. The training center had undergone significant changes since Hargrove's removal, with Lieutenant Reyes, now Major Reyes, appointed as its commander. Conventional thinking will get you killed, Morgan told the class, moving between the workstations where each trainee faced a different practice device. These aren't puzzles with fixed solutions. They're expressions of human ingenuity, often deadly ingenuity. Understanding the bomber's mindset is just as important as understanding the device itself. At the back of the classroom, a familiar figure observed silently Adrian Mercer, now serving as a civilian consultant under strict supervision. His testimony and data had indeed been valuable enough to negotiate reduced charges, though he remained under constant monitoring. The program they had developed together, incorporating Mercer's unconventional challenges and Morgan's grandfather's methodologies, was revolutionizing EOD training across all military branches. The results spoke for themselves. Success rates on detection and neutralization had increased by 37% in just the first quarter since implementation. Today's exercise is different, Morgan announced, drawing the class's attention back to her. Instead of following the manual, I want you to think like the bomb maker. Each of you has a different device. Your task isn't just to disarm it. It's to tell me why it was made this way, what the creator was trying to accomplish, and how you would improve the design if you were in their position. The shocked expressions that greeted this unorthodox assignment quickly gave way to intense concentration as the trainees bent to their task. Morgan moved among them, offering guidance, challenging assumptions, pushing them beyond their comfort zones, just as her grandfather had once done for her. At her side, Specialist Green, now an instructor himself, observed with approval. They're actually thinking, he murmured. Not just following steps. Morgan nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. That's the difference between surviving and thriving in this field. Anyone can follow procedures when everything goes according to plan. It's what you do when the unexpected happens that defines you. Later that evening, as she finished reviewing the trainees' assessments in her office, a knock at the door announced Major Reyes's arrival. How did they do? Reyes asked, setting down a cup of coffee on Morgan's desk, a ritual they had maintained since their days in the field. Better than expected, Morgan replied, gesturing to the stack of reports. Garcia has real potential. She identified 3 design alternatives that even Mercer hadn't considered. And Patel managed to disarm his device using nothing but a paperclip and electrical tape. Reyes smiled. Sounds like someone else I know. Her expression grew more serious. The Pentagon delegation arrives tomorrow. They'll want concrete results, not just innovative methodologies. Morgan leaned back in her chair, confidence evident in her posture. They'll get results. The new protocols have already prevented casualties in 3 separate engagements. Even the most traditional commanders can't argue with those numbers. And Mercer? How's he adjusting to the consultant role? Morgan's expression softened slightly. Better than expected. Having a legitimate channel for his expertise has made a difference. He still pushes boundaries, but constructively now. As they discussed the next day's presentation, Morgan's gaze fell on the shadow box mounted on her office wall, containing her grandfather's service medals, now restored to their rightful place of honor, alongside the pocket knife that had accompanied her through every challenge. He would have loved to see this, she said quietly. The program evolving, adapting, becoming what it always should have been. Reyes followed her gaze to the display. He does see it, she replied simply. Through you. The following morning, Morgan faced the Pentagon delegation with the same quiet confidence she brought to every challenge. General Chang, now head of Special Operations Command, led the group, a deliberate choice that signaled the importance placed on the program's innovations. "Specialist Riley," Chang greeted her. "Or should I say Captain Riley, given your recent promotion?" "Either is fine, General," Morgan replied with a smile. "The rank changes, but the mission remains the same." As she guided the delegation through the training facility, demonstrating the new methodologies and equipment adaptations, Morgan felt a profound sense of purpose. What had begun as a personal quest for vindication had evolved into something far more significant, a transformation of how the military approached one of its most dangerous and essential specialties. When they reached the advanced training room, Morgan paused, allowing the officials to observe as trainees worked through complex scenarios with a creativity and adaptability that would have been discouraged under the old regime. "The numbers speak for themselves," she explained, displaying the latest field results on a large screen. 37% increase in successful neutralizations, 28% reduction in specialist casualties, 45% improvement in detection of non-standard devices. One of the officials, a colonel with decades of traditional EOD experience, looked skeptical. "And you attribute these improvements to abandoning established protocols?" "Not abandoning, sir," Morgan corrected respectfully. "Evolving them. The core principles remain, but we've added layers of adaptive thinking that allow specialists to respond to novel threats without being constrained by outdated procedures." To demonstrate, she led them to a training station where a particularly complex device waited one, based on a design Mercer had created specifically for this presentation. With deliberate precision, Morgan walked through the assessment and disarming process, narrating her thought process as she identified and neutralized 6 separate trigger mechanisms, the last of which would have been invisible to conventional detection methods. "The difference," she explained as she completed the demonstration, "is that we're teaching specialists not just how to follow procedures, but how to think beyond them when necessary, to understand the psychology and methodology behind each device they encounter." General Chang nodded approvingly. "And this consultant who helped design these training devices, the former specialist, Mercer, you believe his continued involvement is essential to the program?" It was a loaded question, one that tested Morgan's commitment to the principles she'd fought to establish. Mercer's involvement remained controversial in some circles, his methods too unorthodox, his past actions too questionable for complete rehabilitation in the eyes of many. Morgan met the general's gaze steadily. "Mercer's perspective is valuable precisely because it challenges us. He thinks differently, which is exactly what we need if we're going to prepare our specialists for a world where threats constantly evolve." Chang studied her for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "Your grandfather said almost exactly the same thing to me 20 years ago, when he proposed the first major overhaul of EOD protocols. The establishment wasn't ready to listen then." She glanced around at the training facility, at the specialists working with confidence and creativity. "I'm glad we're listening now." As the delegation continued their tour, Morgan found herself standing, briefly alone near the memorial wall that had been added to the training center's entrance, a tribute to IED specialists who had given their lives in service. Her grandfather's name had been added recently, his service record officially restored with full honors. She traced the engraved letters with her fingertips, remembering the gentle hands that had first taught her to understand rather than fear the complexity of the devices that had defined both their lives. "We did it, Grandpa," she whispered. "They called me too fragile, but they couldn't see what you always saw, that these hands weren't made for brute force. They were made for understanding." From across the room, she caught sight of her reflection in a polished display case, Captain Morgan Riley in her full uniform, the EOD specialist insignia prominent on her chest. Her grandfather's pocket knife now officially incorporated into her field kit as a specialized tool. The girl who had once been dismissed as too delicate for combat had become the architect of a new generation of specialists, who valued precision and insight as much as courage and steadiness. The transformation hadn't come easily. There had been resistance at every step, barriers erected by those who feared change or resented challenges to their authority. But with each device she disarmed, each protocol she improved, each trainee she mentored, Morgan had proven that true strength lay not in conforming to others' expectations, but in remaining true to one's own unique capabilities. As she rejoined the delegation, guiding them toward the final demonstration of the day, Morgan reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from rejection to vindication, from outsider to leader, from being defined by others' limitations to defining her own path forward. The journey wasn't over. There would be new challenges, new devices, new minds determined to create harm. But now she faced them not alone, but as part of something larger, a community of specialists united not by rigid adherence to outdated methods, but by a shared commitment to evolution, adaptation, and the courage to think beyond the expected. And in that, perhaps, lay the most important lesson of all, that true fragility lies not in being different, but in fearing difference. Not in questioning established wisdom, but in accepting it without challenge. Not in embracing one's unique perspective, but in surrendering it in the face of opposition. As she demonstrated the final technique of the day, disarming a complex device with nothing but her grandfather's pocket knife and her own steady hands, Morgan knew that she had not merely survived in a world that had tried to exclude her. She had transformed it, one device at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.